For as the new heaven and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. For their worms shall not die, neither shall their fly be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring to all flesh. And they shall be an abhorring, and they shall be an abhorring, and they shall be an abhorring to all flesh. And their worms shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Continuing the Gospel of Mark, and I was just thinking to myself, I think we'll just start reading at verse 31. Context-wise, we're looking at this at a very deep context going back several chapters. Other than that, he just healed the man who had the spirit that cometh out but by prayer and fasting, cometh not out but by prayer and fasting, as Jesus described it. And so if we need to say any more, refer back to that. We'll just remember that was in the context, but we'll just start reading in verse 31, and we may have to cut it short today. So 1 second. All right. Oh, wrong page. There we go. Here we are. All right. Verse 31. For he taught his disciples, and said unto them, The Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And after that he is killed, he shall rise the third day. But they understood not that saying, and were afraid to ask him. And he came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, What was it that ye disputed among yourselves by the way? But they held their peace. For by the way, they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12 and said unto them, If any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all, and servant of all. And he took a child, and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said unto them, Whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name, receiveth me. And whosoever shall receive me, receiveth not me, but him that sent me. And John answered him, saying, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and he followeth not us. And we forbade him, because he followeth not us. But Jesus said, Forbid him not. For there is no man which shall do a miracle in my name that can lightly speak evil of me. For he that is not against us is on our part. For whosoever shall give you a cup of water to drink in my name, because you belong to Christ, verily I say unto you, he shall not lose his reward. I have to cough. There we go, sorry. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, I'm going to put that sentence together a little better. And whosoever shall offend one of these little ones that believe in me, it is better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and he were cast into the sea. And if thy hand offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter into life maimed, than having two hands to go into hell, into the fire that shall never be quenched, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched. And if thy foot offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter halt into life, than having 2 feet to be cast into hell, into the fire that can never be quenched, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched. And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. It is better for thee to enter into the kingdom of God with one eye, than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched. For everyone shall be salted with fire, and every sacrifice shall be salted with salt. Salt is good, but if the salt have lost his saltiness, wherewith will ye season it? Have salt in yourselves, and peace one with another. You know, in that little section there, he begins explaining to them, and it's, interesting because it almost seems as an explanation. I don't know if this word for, a lot of times the small words in Greek, I'm not sure what, I since I've never seriously studied it, I've only studied it as a person who uses tools like Bible Hub or, back in the old days, Strong's Concordance, the Green's Interlinear, and things like the Thayer's Greek Lexicon, and then you get your Brown Driver Briggs and your, of course, the New Englishman's Concordance, the Greek and Hebrew Concordance of the Old Testament. I forgot the brand name of those. But they're on my shelf. Don't need them anymore. Not unless you want to go, mobile, which is, even then you don't need it. I get the mobile app. What am I talking about? I'm still thinking like I have a cell phone. Like I don't have, like I have the old cell phone. Like I have I used to have a cell phone. Now I have this pocket computer that also has a cell phone feature. And it's a terrible cell phone. But a pretty amazing pocket computer. So I like the old flip phone better. Much more efficient communicator. That's how they made him in Star Trek. They didn't want you fumbling with the screen. Anyways. That's just personal opinion, by the way. Okay. I was going to look up the word for, and I was setting up the internet thing, and I did it, and then here we go. And I just need to scroll down to verse 31. It's a lot of clicking that gets me here, so forgive me the slowness on that. But wait, am I in the right chapter? Yeah, I am. Right. Wait, I'm just 4. Okay. Gar, for or indeed a conjunction used to express. There's a little quick explanation that comes up. Sorry about the weird glasses thing, but sometimes I just, with the tiny writing and all that, my wife's making an appointment for me. For a conjunction used to express cause. Yeah, explanation, inference, or continuation. Sometimes it's just continuation or an inference. It's not solidly, but it is used to express cause and effect. And this is the closest it comes to explicitly saying that there's some sort, that the cause of him not wanting anyone to know what he does, he said he wouldn't have any man know it about the healing. Now, it's been said that many times, but never gave us any hint of a reason. And as you know, this is something I focus on probably more than other people, just because I want to know. I want to understand what he's talking, why. Like the people sometimes act like the Gospels aren't weird. Like it's like there isn't something more. It's like they always are like, oh yeah, he just ran over there and did this and did that, and there wasn't any meaning to the way they put the stories together. Like there's no meta parable, and I've been inclined to deny meta parables like the parable of the fig tree, in a sense that I don't think like the whole Bible contains a single parable of the fig tree, but the fig tree has a symbolic meaning that Jesus used in a parable. I have a study called The Parable of the Fig Tree. And I thought, and I did that by just examining all those passages. But here, there's a direct points right to it. So I'm clicking the wrong button. So for he taught his disciples. This could be an explanation. That's all I'm saying. The Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they shall kill him. And after he is killed, he shall rise the third day. And I've been postulating, and it seems correct, that the reason he did not want to make himself known is because he's putting the brakes on his crucifixion. It's and that's not out of cowardice or anything. It's because he has a ministry to fulfill, and until he fulfills it, and fulfills all the Father's will, they can't really take him, but also he has to actively participate in it. That's kind of like our lives. It's kind of an interesting thing. Nothing, it says all things work together for good for those that love God, for those who are the called according to his purpose. And I believe in predestination. People say, well, you believe in predestination. Why don't you just sit there and do nothing? Because that's a crappy destiny. That's why I'm sorry for the profanity, the mild profanity, but it's profanity nonetheless, because it's far from holy. but you know, right? And so he doesn't want that to be known. And in our lives, you know, we also kind of walk, like, I just say that this because it's like all things work together for our good, but it's not obvious, right? And well, what I was saying is, like, I don't want to just do nothing. I am expected to be a participant in these things. You know, that's why God gives us faith, so we can respond to him. Because though I think, though the Lord knows our responses and all that, because he's God. In some ways, he can't back out of that. He can't back out of being the creator entirely. You know, he can, even in the person of the Son, like when he's Jesus on earth, he limits himself, but he's still completely God. He can't back out of it. He's always in his totality, still the same essence of being. You know, but we go through our lives and we are expected to participate through faith, participate in the works of God. And because we do so voluntarily, we do, because, you know, it isn't that free will doesn't exist per se. It's just that it's kind of the way people talk about it, it's not like all choices and stuff are way weighted by circumstances and stuff. No one ever gets like just a, you know, like, and I don't think that's what it's really suggesting, or it shouldn't be what it's suggesting. And also, it shouldn't be understood to be the determinative factor of the universe, because some people act like it's our will, whatever we decide, that's what's going to be. You know, it's like, will you choose Jesus or not? No, that's actually not how it works. Though you have free will to choose him or not, the Lord completely knows, because he created everything. And so there's nothing outside of the reach of his determinate counsel and foreknowledge. God is just that sophisticated. You know, I remember the determinists, even the determinists. You know, I've talked about the series on the brain with David Eagleman, where at the end he was talking about determinism, and he had a big cube full of mouse traps with ping pong balls, and they were all set up ready to snap and create chaos, right, when he dropped one in. And he was saying every time you do it, it's different, and you can't predict it. And I was, well, we can't predict it, but there are so many there are many factors there. They're not entirely random. All the forces of nature are working and just doing what they do. It's just that we cannot know them at that level to predict anything, but God knows everything. And so it's not just a predictive, like he isn't just predicting the future because of the way he does it, because of the way he makes it. He actually determines it. Anyways. But Christ also, even though his path is determined and they can't take him, he still has to run from them. He still has to escape from them. He still has to avoid them, because that's how we have to live. That's how God, and why? Why doesn't God just determine everything and just make? That's not how he wants to raise his sons. Because he gave them power to become the sons of God. God wants sons that are not just cookie cutters stamped out of the factory. You know what I mean? I mean, that's my explanation. And I do think it's an important explanation. Romans 8 goes a long way to understanding, like, why does God do anything? When you understand that the purpose of God in the world is to raise up sons unto himself, is that the human being is a kind of a, you know, God looked at the margins. He saw perfect creatures that he could make, you know, and then, but then he saw imperfect ones and he said, I can redeem those. As I say, what's the people say the problem of evil? It's so easy. If God didn't allow evil in the world, you wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be here. And it's God's kindness that he does allow the wicked to exist, and it's opportunity to repent. And yes, in the meantime, they do evil against other evil people. Innocent only relatively. We're all only relatively innocent. You know, I mean, it's like, people always think of, like, when, you know, like Jesus here, he says, it's an amazing little section here, right? Let's get into it. First of all, besides the greatest, I'm going to go back to that, but the children, he goes to the child issue, right? And then he goes to the issue of Anyone who does anything to offend one of these little ones, let a millstone be hanged about his neck and cast in the sea. But many of those who are the offenders also have, been offended, so to speak, have been acted upon in their childhood, right? We don't take any excuse for that, do we? Or do we? Anyways, because people will talk about, yes, well, let's just go in order. Let's go in order. So what I'm saying is like that people say, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler as a baby, would you do it? It's like, well, you have information after the fact. What bothers people is people know that God knows Hitler before he's in the womb. And he sent him into the world. And like, why'd you do that to us, Lord? It's like, well, I'm having a lot of tolerance for evil these days. Ever since the Garden of Eden. Man, we wanted to be like, we willingly participated in that too. We want to be like God. We want to be his sons. There's something we aspire to. I see people who don't believe in God, they say, you are a God. They really do. It's weird. It's not weird. It's understandable. But it's from even in the scriptures, men become so deluded. Anyways, so he speaks of rising the third day. It's very important. It's one of the core elements of Christianity. We believe Jesus rose. Otherwise, how can he be God if Jesus rose not? That's why it's one of the prime reasons, because it makes all his claims and the claims of his disciples. That's what legitimizes them. It's like, well, he rose from the dead, didn't he? He goes, well, no, he didn't. It's like, I don't know. It's weird because he answered to me when I called on his name, even at this late date. I knew he's alive somewhere. Or at least he's willing to send his servants. But they come in his name. They understood not that saying, but were afraid to ask. They're like, well, that's a parable we can't unwind, man. Because it's one of the few things he says at any time that is just plain as day. Because a lot of this rest of this chapter, think about the last few parts, but it's like, everyone's going to be salted with fire, and everyone will be salted, every sacrifice salted with salt. Have salt in yourself and sacrifice in this. And you're like, okay, obviously there's hidden meaning there. He's not just talking about like, literally. But the literal elements are not to be discounted because they help you understand the symbolism. You have to understand it literally on some level, because if you don't understand the literal story, if you don't follow the literal story, just like with the parable of the sower, you take the literal elements and you understand what the symbolic meaning of them is. And you can kind of, because almost everything that's put into a story like that is going to have some sort of part of me. There's very little waste in something like that. Okay, and so they were afraid to ask him, and then he comes to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, what was it that you disputed among yourselves about? What were you guys arguing about? He knew they had some sort of argument. And he also knew what it was about, but he asked them anyways. and here's the thing. This is God's modus operandi from the Garden of Eden. He asks questions to which, of course, he knows the answer. He always does this. It's what makes Jesus in the Gospels remarkable in that way, because he's a character written who talks to people like God talks to people, as far as from the Old Testament. Asking rhetorical questions that are, what were you talking about? Anyways. Adam, where are you, Adam? Adam. They're questions for you to ponder, really. They held their peace. For, by the way, they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. Who's the greatest among us? That's, people want to be great. I don't want to be a mediocre Christian. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a mediocre. I want to be a great one. But that's a different consideration, right? We're thinking quality. They're talking rank. Who's going to rank highest? I'm boss of you, and you're boss of me, and all that kind of stuff. I tell you what to do. You don't tell me what to do. I tell you what's what. You don't tell me what's what. Like in the family, the father is the greatest. None can oppose him, or they shouldn't. I don't know if, it's like I said, women have this practice called hypergamy. It means they marry men that they look up to, or usually do, or at some point they thought there was something about that guy that they looked up to. And maybe you don't now, but you know what? Whatever. You made your choice. You can women can do a lot to build up their man, and he is worth listening to. I think, I always said with my wife, I don't like when she argues with me, but if she tells me how she feels, that's usually something I can't argue with. I mean, unless you're just the kind of guy who's like, I don't care how you feel. Then you're not going to get along too good. Here's the thing. Yeah, because it's like I like to explore arguments. I want to argue it down to the nitty gritty, and that can be frustrating because I'm really good at arguing points, even when I'm not sure which side I'm on. So I always tell people who are around me to avoid arguing with me and just tell me some other way, especially when it comes to decision making, because it's something that I don't like making bad decisions. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. They cost me money and stuff like that. And when you're poor, it hurts. Who will be the greatest? Well, I'll tell you what, as being father, I tell you about being father. I'm a patriarch and all that. I have 7 sons and a daughter and all that. But Jesus never spoke truer. You want to be the greatest of all, you become the servant of all. It's like nobody is more under service than I am. It's like, and nobody's time is less his own than mine is. Even though I try to make time like entirely it never feels like it's entirely for myself. Even when I'm doing things by myself, it's like I don't feel like I'm just doing my own will. Almost everything I'm moving towards is I feel compelled. I even at one point I had a song I was working. It's taken 3 different forms. The latest, I was like toying around with the melody, and I was like, World War III. But it was actually a couple years ago. I was working out in the garden, and it was super hot, and I was really stressed under a lot of things going on, and it was the song "I'm a Slave." I'm a slave. It's like my will is not my own. I'm not gonna recite all the lyrics here, but that was part of it. My will is not my own. I can't do what I want to do. I got to do what other people want me to do. Not necessarily what they want me to do, but what they need me to do. Other people need me to do things, and that's what I have to do. And that's the thing is like that kind of, people often think of being the greatest in terms of the despotic rulers and tyrants of the earth who use their power to serve themselves. So I was saying the other day to someone that communism always fails because I've encountered there's basically, you encounter a lot of people who say they're communists, and they're these kind of dreamer types. They really mean well, and they're very nice, and they want everyone to share, and they'll have all these good explanations for everything. But every time someone tries a communist attempt, there's always someone who seizes power, and they're the unscrupulous, and they always hijack it. And dreamers will never, ever be able to stop that because they don't have the tools. They just don't have the tools. And those dreaming idealistic types are always going to lose out to the psychopaths in that regard. in those like dreams of creating paradise on earth. They're not creating paradise on earth. Forget it. We can prepare the earth for God's kingdom as best we can, but we will never create paradise on earth on our own. We might go a long way to bringing hell on earth. I think that's going to be pretty on the menu. We've got that. I think we might have that locked down. Actually, we might be pretty well on our way there. But heaven, no. But they will create hell in the name of heaven, of course. But you think about it. The other day, I didn't complete my thought. I was talking about the president of the National Association of Evangelicals. He was on the Oprah Winfrey Heaven program. What did he say? Heaven is a buffet of, you can eat as many pastries as you want and never get fat or sick. Or, it's like, is that what heaven is? That sounds a lot like the Muslim heaven where you get all the virgins. And when you think about what a lot of people think heaven is like, you lay around, you don't have to work, you stuffed your face full of donuts, you got like virgins crawling all over you. That's what they want on earth. They're sick pedophiles who want, to just have no consequences for their sinful action and to be able to do whatever they well please. That is what their idea of heaven is. And of course, it's heaven for them and hell for you and for all those who are subject to them. That's why it's no kind of heaven or God's kingdom. When you see the kingdom that Jesus described, it's nothing like that. He never mentions, because it talks about the marriage supper of the Lamb and stuff like that. And it's like, you got to understand what those symbols, mean. Jesus said, you're never going to thirst again. You're never going to hunger again. What are you talking about? You're not going to follow passions and lusts. Well, I'm going to give up my passions and lusts. I mean, you may have passions, but I mean the carnal passions. You'll be able to, it's cool. Once the carnal passions are gone, you'll be able to follow the true passions. I mean, you ever feel the true passion? Like when you pursue something you truly love that's good? Like when I'm writing a new melody or something like that, something that excites me. And have none of the problems of the flesh that get in the way, whether it be the pains or the desires or any of that. No, there's none of that carnality in heaven. That's such a wrong way to think of it. And same thing with the the rulers. It's not just true in heaven, it's also on earth that a good leader is servant of all. The king is the servant of all, or a good king is, because he cares for his people. A benevolent ruler. A lot of people have often, my dad always said from my youth, and a lot of people have said so, and it's true. I think it's true that a benevolent dictatorship is the best form of government, because then you get one person who's making the decisions and they make all the good, right decisions. Unfortunately, that doesn't usually happen. Not necessarily, like I said, that doesn't preclude like a free market, because I remember people saying, someone asked a guy was saying they should make Trump king, and I don't think we should. By the way, I still like our way of, I think we should hold on to our republic. But and he was joking a little bit about it. And then the woman said, well, isn't that communist? And he's like, no, we'll still have our freedoms. He'll just be king. And that's it. You can have, when people are law abiding and stuff, you don't have to have a ruler who slams his fist down and keeps his boot on your neck all the time. And that's why I think they're using this medical stuff to begin to get us used to having a boot on our neck, so then they can just put it on our neck at will. Anyways, so yeah, rulers in this world, you look at Washington, how rich everyone over there is getting. If you drive around, someone was saying, back 30, 40 years ago, you go to Washington, there wasn't like Porsche dealerships and Lamborghini dealerships and Ferrari dealerships, right? All these really high-end vehicle dealerships in Washington, D.C., because they're so wealthy there, And people do get wealthy off the government, not just, and it's, yes, they get very fine, fat salaries and fine, fat pensions. And then they make money on top of that by using their offices for corruption, for corrupt uses to take, not everyone obviously, but government employees sure get a lot of money, as far as I'm concerned. Considering I raised my family on less than $50,000 a year. Yeah. He sat down and called the 12 and said to them, if any man desire to be first, the same should be last of all and servant of all. The best kind of ruler the best kind of leader, the best kind of, the best kind of top man is the top man that's in charge, but also is looking after the rest and everyone else. Because that is the essence of what you have a ruler for. Why do you have a king? What is the purpose of putting someone over another person? Why am I over my children? To make them into my little servants? To make them into my little, my little sycophants? They're going to, oh, Dad, you're greatest. It's like, yes, that's what you say. When I walk in the room, you get down on your knees and you scrape and bow. When I begin to speak, everyone falls silent. Not that that doesn't happen sometime. I try not to interrupt because I don't want to be rude, because I'm not a tyrant. Even though I definitely am in charge. I definitely do have the last say. I definitely do operate. I have an ultimate, when any major thing in the family, I have a veto. Though I listen. I'm willing to be persuaded. I'm not unpersuadable. But also we know that ultimately I can negate things. That doesn't mean I don't make my wife come to me for every decision. Please don't. It's like I'll go insane. That's why Moses appointed people under him. You have to have people in authority under you. And that's where the problem comes. It's like Jesus appoints people in authority under him, right? And they appoint people in authority under them, I suppose. And how many of those people start getting the wrong idea about authority? Yes, a part of being an authority is to tell people what to do and what to think. What you ought to think, what you ought to do, let's say, in the Christian context. This is what you ought to do, this is what you ought to think. If I have authority, but because that is a form, even the teaching is a form of authority. And, because when I sit here and I'm teaching the Bible, I'm going to tell you what it means. I've got to be careful to make sure that I deliver that faithfully. I have to serve in that. But you often see people, they just use the Bible to serve themselves, to make themselves a fine fat salary and a fine fat pension. They don't appear to be servant of all. All appear to serve them. You can say in some way, I get it. I always look at the church and I feel like it seems like the pastors are always, a lot of them are just trying to emulate the multitudes in the Gospels. But I see nothing particularly great about that. Jesus is always like, he saves his most important teachings for the intimate group that's around him, And just like when he went to the mall, and he, one thing we didn't talk about, I don't remember we had 2 feedings, but the way he fed the people, I remember a friend of mine used to emphasize this so much. I'm like, okay, I get it. He gave it to his disciples, and his disciples gave it to the people. And people like to emphasize that. It's like, see, the church has to be in between the people. It's like, no. The intimate, Christ doesn't necessarily, it goes from us to them, yes, and from you to them and all that. There is a passing out of things, right? Christ feeds his disciples, and then his disciples are expected to go out and give it to the people. And even though the people, they were taking up the fragments, that's just showing the status at that time. When the apostles received power from on high, they went out and preached the gospel much more effectively. I mean, after Christ's resurrection, you consider, at his death, how low everything had come, and how many, he went from being followed by multitudes to being dead and buried. And his disciples were all, many of them were scattered. Smite the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. I mean, they came back together, but it was a dark moment for them. So in the matter of being the greatest, he took a child, sets him in the midst of them, and when they had taken him in his arms, probably a small child, maybe 2, right? I think that word child means a little child. I'm not going to look it up. Whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receiveth me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth not me, but him that sent me. On one, first of all, a child is a very humble position. And so I was saying, why do children obey their parents? Why do parents tell their children what to do? Well, I forget that sometimes other parents don't see it the way I see it, which is weird. I always think most parents see parenting the way I do. But I realize that that's not actually true. For a lot of parents, their kids are like their life accessories. It's like, these are my kids, and this is my car, and this is my house, and these are the kids. All right, kids, get the hell out of here. Sorry. Oh, we can say hell. It's in this chapter. You know, and I'm just saying that because I know people whose parents just weren't into them. You know, they had the kids, but they weren't that into them. They were mostly into themselves. See, the whole purpose of the house and the kids and all that was to serve them, to make them look good, to raise their status in society. That's how they felt. And having children in a house and a reputation is not a bad thing. But not just as a facade. You know, just it's like this picture of like, oh, look at, 2.3 children and a wife and a husband, and that sort of, that facade of that they make fun of as like, oh, well, the 50s image of the nuclear family and all that. For a lot of history, that is not how things are. Now, the nucleus of the family is important, but there's, you don't want to just have an atom with just a nucleus. You want to have lots of electrons and neutrons and all that stuff. Or electrons and valence levels or whatever. Yeah, the more valence levels you have, the more electrons you have, the more powerful that particle is. And if you get enough electrons spinning around that nucleus, it goes critical mass and you get an explosion, okay? So you want to build on the nuclear family. The nuclear family is a good thing, but it's like something to build on. You start off with your wife, and then you have some kids, and then you have grandkids, and then you have, maybe you get to great-grandkids, and then you're looking down on this huge thing. And then you die. There you go. It's like, but it happened. It's like, who knows where it goes from there. But the purpose of being a parent is to look after these people and raise them up to adulthood, to be strong and, to look after their well-being. I mean, I look at raising my children the way I feel that God would look at me to raise me, like raising me up into a child of God, or to be a son of His. What does He want me to become? I know what He wants me to become, like Christ, but what does that look like in me? What does being Christ-like look like in Paul? Because I'm not Jesus, I'm me. I'm not that person, I'm another person. So obviously there's going to be a similarity of standards, but it's going to be a different individual. But the children, so, when we receive a child, when we, benevolence, we want God to raise us up with, to me this seems so painfully obvious. But also, I don't know. Like, if I saw myself when I was a kid doing something bad, I look back at embarrassing times in my youth, right? And things that got me to a place where I was embarrassed, because I embarrassed myself. Mostly. I would like to have intercepted that kid and told him, hey, the way you're becoming is going to become embarrassed. So don't do that. Stop this and don't do that. And, sometimes discipline, no discipline at the time seems pleasant. It's part of love also. So, I'm just saying, it's like there is a fullness of love that a parent should give to the child. And that's part of our obedience. And what he's saying is like, you want to be in charge of everything, but you understand that being in charge is about responsibility for the least person. That's why I say that, when I teach, to me, I don't like the way the person I used to, I first learned the Bible from was not a good teacher. And not just because of his doctrinal mistakes, but because of the way he made it like about being smart and stuff. Because the Bible, knowing Jesus isn't about being clever and smart. The gospel is accessible to the most, to the simplest among us. Let's put it that way. To the most simple, uncomplicated person, the gospel should be understandable, because that is who Jesus came to save. And that is who we are to receive in His name. And not be like, you're not important, you stupid retard. I don't want to, get out of here. You're wasting my time. I'm an important person. I'm in charge. Don't you know who I am? I'm important. I'm in a position of power, even if I'm a midwit, which often is the case. We get these midwits who think they're geniuses. That's Biden, by the way. Our president is a midwit who thinks he's brilliant. And now he's a demented midwit who's neither brilliant nor cognizant. And I don't, like I said, I'll make anything political as I like. Isaiah spoke against the kings of his day. I'll speak against that guy. Talk about someone who doesn't know the role of a child. The guy, you can't get him close to a child without him sticking his nose up their ear practically, trying to sniff at him weirdly. I get it. I mean, I know what a baby smells like, but I don't have I don't have this compulsion to sniff them though, especially strangers' babies. It's like if it's your grandkid, whatever. Even if you do it too much, it's weird. I don't know. Because the only person I can think of inhaling deeply any time in my life, I like to smell my wife's hair. I get it, but that's my wife. Don't you go smelling her hair, Joe. Creepy Joe. We got to receive the little ones, the simple ones, the ones that don't understand. That's why, like I said, I don't like, I said the simplest among us. I hate words like stupid or idiot or any of those things. And I use those I was playing a character. Because there's no escaping whatever term we use to describe them. If we said, we'll never use any words, we'll call them simple. And the simple will become an insult. In fact, it is simpleton, right? It's just not a very powerful one, right? But I mean, if we said whatever we use to describe someone who is just naturally less gifted in many ways and thought and all, much like a child, because they'll describe people's development in terms of arrested development. Like I remember, my wife used to work with retarded adults, and there'd be groups of them that would be called, these are the ones, the high-functioning ones. They have the mindset of like a 12-year-old. I say mindset because I know some really brilliant 12-year-olds who obviously are a little ahead of that. But they mean like on the average or whatever, And then some people have, mental retardation that renders them with an infantile brain. And so that's tragic and all that. But the point is, we receive those with patience. In a lot of cultures, they don't, okay? Right? I watched this thing about, I think I mentioned in the past about like the things going down in Haiti. And you want to talk about where the little children are just getting absolutely, I mean, right now in our world, there are probably more children suffering than any time in the entire history of the human race. Just because there's more kids already, right? And right now, human trafficking is one of the biggest international, criminal, organized crime things that's going on. And people try to say, it's a conspiracy theory. It's like, you know what? You're a conspiracy theory, all right? That's what it's like. Yeah. Okay, shut up, you people. We know you're traitorous scum and lying. We know all the people in the news are lying, and they're traitors. And like all these people, they do it for filthy lucre, for their own lives, because they value themselves more than others. They don't care about little ones. Who cares about the little ones? Like I said, if you need a kidney, okay, or if your child needs a kidney, who wouldn't kill some other kid so their kid could live? Well, maybe some of us wouldn't, but that's what goes on. There's hospitals. Well, there's a hospital described by this one. I've seen the photographs of it. It's a nightmare. But when they have kids with handicaps, they just put them in a room and they don't take care of them. They just let them die. Or sell off their organs if they're worth it. You want to talk about it could get you believe. It could make, when I think about things like that, I could start believing in things like eternal torment. But I don't believe in eternal torment. I just believe in limited torment. We'll torture them. Sure. We'll torture them. I don't mind. Some people deserve to be tortured before they die, right? I mean, people that do awful things to kids, yeah. It'd be better. Like, it'd be less torturous to have a millstone around your neck and be thrown into the sea. There's a scene from a recent war movie where they had a guy, they tied him to an anchor and they threw him in the water. You think as he's getting dragged down, wow, what a terrible way to die, right? I mean, there are worse, there are worse, I mean, crucifixion isn't quite as terrifying, but it's much more painful. I mean, being thrown into the sea is kind of a terrifying way to go, right? It's like, no one's ever going to find me, being plumbed into the bottom of the sea. We know the sea gives up the dead, though, so don't worry. The Lord will bring you back. But it's terrifying. And that's what Jesus uses to describe, whoever should cause them to stumble. That's much later, actually. That's verse 42. But that shows that, to me, that shows that the level of they should experience. Now that's better. So they should experience more horror than that. And I do believe in that, because the purpose, look, I don't believe in eternal torment, but I do believe everyone is raised and judged. And they must experience judgment in a real way. And yes, they will feel the sting of it. And we're going to get down to that. Hopefully we have enough time. Yeah, we got enough time. We'll see. Because we have to deal with each of these things. Because this right here, even this one, this is kind of like a big deal. Whoever receives such a little child in my name receiveth me, and whoever shall receive me receiveth not me, him that sent me. It's in the name of Jesus, that you receive the weak and the small, because they belong to Christ. But also because we belong to Christ, Because like I said, if someone who, because what can an infant do? What can an infant say? Nothing. But, I think those are the very ones we're called to receive in a certain sense, but also like in the sense of like, who's the greatest? You want to be the greatest, be willing to receive the least. Be willing to serve the least, because that is what it means to be great, is according to Jesus. And you look at his own example. He didn't come into the earth to be pampered and served, but rather to serve and to die. And remember that's why you're here too, if you are one of his sons. Even if you're not, you will serve and you will die, because all will serve. And then they asked him about this. We saw one casting out devils in your name. Someone was using your name. We said, hey, don't do that. You're not one of us. I read this as though John is confessing this, because I do think he understood from the previous. I think from the previous thing, he thought he should say this to Jesus because he wants to know if they did the right thing or not. And he suspects that maybe not. Because when he hears us receive the children, and he's like, those that believe on me, if you receive them, you receive not only them, but me, and they come in my name, and all this stuff. And then John's conscience, I believe, was pricked. And so he confesses it. I just think it that way. Or he could say, you could read it as, hey, master, we saw one casting out devils, like he's bragging about it, but I don't think so. Forbid him not. There is no man which shall do a miracle in my name that can lightly speak evil of me. Well, that's pretty obvious, right? If anyone has the faith, because if you're doing a miracle in the name of Jesus, and Jesus, of course, probably knows the guy, of course, right? I mean, because he's doing his name, he would feel the virtue going forth. He'd probably be tickled about it and quiet about it. And he saw the disciples and wondered about them, but he that is not against us is on our part. That can be taken, I think, a little too axiomatically. But in a sense that, like, someone who isn't fighting against us, but also doing the things that guy's doing. It's not just neutral people are for us. That's not it. But someone who's doing the same works, but is not opposed to us, but like parallel, they're with us. Someone moving in parallel is not, there's not just like one thing. And also there's a great verse against the idea of like one church. One church, the Holy Catholic Church. There is one church in God. That also is here. But what it's really against is the idea of one church on earth. There's only one church in heaven. On earth, there are many churches. The book of Revelation has 7, and 7 is a symbolic number for totality. So there is much more than 7, really. Of course, there's many, many churches. There are churches in people's houses. There are churches in wherever they happen to meet, in the catacombs and the tombs in the old times. But this is a verse that's sort of the idea that like everyone has to be gathered together in one little denomination is already out. You don't have to be in the same group together on earth to be part of the church. That is straight out. No way. Jesus forbids it. All right? I get so sick of it. He forbids it. What the Catholic Church did, trying to be the only church, Jesus Christ forbid you. I can do miracles and I don't need your permission. Because if you're able to do anything in Christ's name, it's because he receives you. Because it takes faith to move him. And like I said, it only takes a little faith to move God. I have Christ. I don't need you. You have Christ. You don't need me, per se. Now, maybe we need each other to work together, but you don't need each other like to be a Christian or to do the works. Sometimes people have things and they go off. Now, I said I don't need it. I know there are scriptures that contradict that. Like when Paul says, should the eye say, I have no need of the hand? And what I mean is, let me put it differently. The eye doesn't need to be in control of the hand. All right? And the hand doesn't need to be in control of the eye. There is a head, and the head is Christ. As someone said, I forgot, it was Martin Luther, if the Pope was the head of the church would be a two-headed monster. Like I said, I'm not in the habit. I don't really want to make any habit of attacking other Christians or denominations in my study these days because I feel like the enemy is so strong, it's really not the time to attack other believers, except to correct doctrine, which I will do. I don't say that in a way to attack them, but I'm just saying we have a right to be independent. I have a right to be independent from other physical churches. It's not that I don't need you. I need you. I acknowledge you. I acknowledge your necessity, but I need you to acknowledge me without claiming that I need to be absorbed or assimilated into your Borg or whatever in your denomination. I don't want to be part of your little self-perpetuating hierarchy of corruption, because that's what those denominations are. They're self-perpetuating hierarchies of corruption. Because what happens is they become corrupt. They get more. Every church denomination devolves into, there's like I said, it's not the Lutheran Church. It's the Missouri Synod. That's the one. You get 15 denominations down. And all the other ones are heretics. Well, you know what? After a while, it's like, yeah, I know there's a lot of heresies running around. But stop trying to think of yourself as the one true church, all right? The one true church is in heaven. And the only person who knows where the walls are that keep people in and people out are Jesus. He's the only one. And the Father, of course. And the Spirit, of course. But the only one is God. If they're not doing something explicitly evil or teaching false teachings that are contrary to the gospel, if they're not against us, if we're working in parallel, if there's no complaint, then they don't have to be part of the same group. Period. Whoever will give you a cup of water in my name because you belong to Christ, he shall not lose his reward. Those that show you kindness. And verses like this often have made me think that, with the mark of the beast and stuff like that, that's how you're going to get by, is that people will break the rules for you. People with the mark of the beast will deal with you. Maybe out of their own corruption sometimes, because they can sell you meat at twice the price. They're willing to do it or trade with you even though you don't have the mark, because they just took it because they have to. They don't really believe in anything, So there can be, but that can lead someone to something. Someone who shows kindness like that can be a prelude to God opening their eyes. when they do a little act of kindness to someone who is serving Christ, he is not unmindful of that. And also to those who do, and notice he uses the idea of cup of water. That means in the least way bless. You know what I mean? In the least way bless. That's what, when someone's thirsty, to give them a drink. It's just the least thing you could do, right? It's not a big deal, right? It's no big deal. That's why he says this, even this, the least kindness. Something that people would, unless they're actively warring, they'll give a drink to their enemies, right? Out of just common decency. But if it's because of Christ, see, that's also, it's not just because you're a Christian. Well, it is because you're a Christian. That's the point. It's not just because, it's not just because they help you and you happen to be a Christian. It's because they help you because you're a Christian. That's why I say, if it's because, and it's always that, because you're acting in his will. Like, for example, the mark of the beast is a perfect example of this, because while they have the mark of the beast, the ones who won't be receiving it will be that'll be me. And anyone who helps me will be thinking, like, because this person belongs to Christ. And they may even regret taking the mark, just like people regret getting the vaccine. And I tell you what, if you take the mark, your only hope. I wouldn't say don't take the mark and then think, like, well, I'll just be the guy who mules stuff for everybody. That's kind of dirty. I don't know if we should do that. No, I definitely say no, don't do that. Because you can't play with that kind of fire and not get burned. You cannot take fire into your bosom like that. You can't take the mark of the beast. No, not willingly. Just like Peter, you can't willingly deny Christ. You can't just do that on purpose. You can't set out to deny him just to have a cool story. No. But I believe that there will be some. Even though it says, whoever takes the mark, they have no rest, day or night, no escape. Everybody who takes the mark, or the beast, and all that stuff. Well, you know what? But Jesus has a little clause here. And this will override, I think, potentially. But don't tell anybody. Keep it a secret. I don't want them. I don't want. Here's the thing: the evil ones won't care. They won't want to do you good. They won't believe it's going to get them a reward. Or even though other ones, they'll probably just do it out of human kindness, which is nice, especially because it may save them from immediate incineration upon the return of Christ. It may put them in the category of the sheep and the goats. He said, you saw me hungered and you fed me. You saw me naked and you clothed me. You saw me thirsty. You gave me to drink. So when, Lord? Well, when as you did it to the least of these, my brethren. There are some. I don't think we will lose. We will be overcome and destroyed by the beast. I don't think we won't have any, I don't think our preaching is just for nothing in the tribulation. I don't think it's just one defeat after the next. I do think we will get through to people. I do think people will hear. I do think people will repent before it's too late. Not everyone, of course, majority, no. But there will be a point to it, is what I'm saying. It's not just like this hopeless battle. It's not hopeless. We are filled with hope for our own sake, but also for the sake of others, because we will bring salvation even in the midst of the wrath of God. There will be salvation wrought, because that's what salvation is from. That's what salvation is from. It's from the wrath of God, that you should not enter into that judgment. Okay. And if you offend, it is better for him to have a millstone and cast in the sea. People like to mention that. Yes. They usually put it in context of pedophiles and all that. But, Jesus, that's a good extreme example. But really, he says offend means cause to stumble. You know what I mean? That is a kind of a stumbling. I mean, he doesn't mean like pedophiles, by the way. He doesn't mean pedophiles. He means whoever shall cause to stumble. And that means to go a little bit off the path. Yeah, I agree. Pedophiles hurt kids. That's much worse than what he's talking about. What I'm trying to say is you need to tone that down a bit. You understand? Because people will say that. It's like, no. He's talking about you, Mom. He's talking about you, Mom. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about you, Dad. Not my dad, not my mom necessarily. But you know what I'm saying? He's talking about people who give their who screw their kids up with the least little screw ups. Because I see both these as small. Give them a cup of water or cause them to offend. Because who cares about offending a child? You care about offending a child? Causing them to stumble in what sense, though? Well, away from Christ, I think. So that is a great offense. Greater than, the other one. Maybe, but in a sense, a lesser thing. It seems like a little thing. You know what I mean? Cause them to not believe in Jesus. Like it's you, Sunday school teacher. It's you, pastor, who lead astray the children so that they reject Christ. Because I almost feel like, right, if I was to take this on where's where we're going to stop and I have to go. That's fine, because it'll be fine. The next section will be fine for a whole good look. But offend these little ones that believe in me is better for him than a millstone. Yeah. When people, I often talk about kids who grow up Christian, and they fall away. That this offenses is the same thing he talked about when they they immediately are offended. Tribulation. What it means, they depart from the faith. And I take this like this: whoever shall cause to depart from the faith. I think that, well, at least that's one aspect of it. And maybe I'm overemphasizing that one, but it certainly doesn't mean like just. I mean, pedophilia, of course, they deserve, of course, same things. But the point is, that's another level of offense. He's talking about something much lighter than that. Seeming, nobody thinks so much of like, oh, well, I turned him off God because of my overbearing, because I feel inadequate or whatever. So I just abuse my child verbally all the time. And I wave the Bible in their face and tell them they're going to hell. And I tell, and all that, like some cliche. I don't know people like that per se. But things going that way and causing kids to offend and making them hate you, obviously, physical abuse is even further down the road. But I'm thinking of small things. Anyways, thanks for joining me this study. I got to get going. Oh, yeah, I got to get going. And I won't be back tomorrow, unfortunately. I would have liked to continue the study in chapter 9 here because I really wanted to talk about this last part today, but we'll do it on Monday. Tomorrow I'm not going to be in town during the study time, so until next time, Monday, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy.
For as the new heaven and the new earth which
Meditate
I
on
will
this.
make shall remain before me, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. For their worms shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring to all flesh. And they shall be an abhorring, and they shall be an abhorring, and they shall be an abhorring to all flesh, and their worms shall not die.